A legendary city vanishes beneath the sea in a single day. For centuries, the story of Atlantis was thought to be pure fantasy. But what if a real city suffered the exact same fate? Today we journey to uncover the lost city of Helike. By the end, you will know the true story of a civilization swallowed by the earth and sea. We will explore why it disappeared and how its discovery rewrites the line between myth and history. What forgotten secrets lie buried just beneath our feet? Our story begins not with a shovel in the earth, but with a philosopher's pen. 2,400 years ago, the Greek thinker Plato wrote of a powerful island empire existing 9,000 years before his own time. He called this place Atlantis. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, he paints a picture of an idyllic, circular city, rich with rare metals and lush vegetation. Its people were master engineers and navigators, possessing a technology that seemed almost magical to the ancient world. They lived in a golden age of prosperity and power. But this advanced civilization grew arrogant, launching a war against the fledgling city of Athens. And then, in a single cataclysmic day and night of earthquakes and floods, the entire island sank beneath the waves, vanishing forever. Plato intended his tale as a moral lesson about the dangers of hubris, a story of a great society punished by the gods for its pride. For centuries, scholars have debated whether Atlantis was pure fiction, a political allegory, or a distant memory of a real disaster. This legendary sunken city has become the ultimate historical ghost, a template for every lost world story we tell. But what if this template was not born from nothing? What if a real event, witnessed and recorded, provided the terrifying blueprint for Plato's fable? To find that answer, we must leave the realm of philosophers and journey to a specific, stormy coastline in Greece. That blueprint for a sunken city was etched into history on the northern coast of the Peloponnesian Peninsula. Here stood Helike, a real metropolis of immense power and prestige. It was not a philosopher's fable, but the principal city of the mighty Achaean League, a confederation of Greek city-states that wielded significant influence. Helike's wealth flowed from two sources: its bustling port that commanded trade across the Corinthian Gulf, and its sacred soil. This city was the religious heart of the region, the central sanctuary of Poseidon, god of the sea and earthquakes. Imagine the grandeur of its temple, a place where pilgrims and politicians alike came to pay homage to the earth shaker. This was a city that literally built its identity and its economy on the favor of the very god who, according to myth, would one day destroy Atlantis. Its coins were stamped with the god's likeness, a proud declaration of their divine patron. For its citizens, Helike was the center of the world, a thriving, tangible place of politics, commerce, and faith. Its existence is documented in the writings of other ancient historians, a fact of the classical world, not a legend from a bygone age. This solid foundation of historical reality makes what happened next so much more terrifying than any fiction. The ground itself seemed to know what was coming. In the winter of 373 BC, witnesses reported a terrifying exodus. For 5 days, every mouse, weasel, and snake in the city of Helike abandoned their homes and fled in a mass migration toward the higher ground of the mountains. The citizens watched this bizarre procession with a deep and growing dread, for they believed it was an omen of Poseidon's wrath. Then, on a dark night, the earth answered. A colossal earthquake struck with unimaginable force, shattering the city's foundations. The ground convulsed, toppling temples and houses in a single, violent tremor. But the horror was only beginning. As the survivors stumbled through the rubble in the darkness, a new sound rose over the cries of the wounded, the deafening roar of the sea. The earthquake had displaced a massive volume of water in the Corinthian Gulf, generating a towering tsunami that rushed inland. The historian Strabo would later write that a vast chasm opened in the earth, swallowing parts of the city whole before the wave even hit. Then the sea crashed over the ruins, drowning everything and everyone that remained. By morning, Helike was gone, not simply damaged but completely erased. Where a powerful metropolis once stood, there was only a featureless expanse of salt water. The geographer Pausanias recorded that every single citizen perished, and the city itself sank so completely that only the tips of the tallest bronze statues remained, their heads breaking the surface like silent, tragic sentinels marking a watery grave. For generations after, fishermen would tell stories of catching their nets on a ghostly city beneath the waves. The destruction of Helike was so absolute it echoed through the ancient world. Its story was not just whispered by local fishermen, it was meticulously recorded by the great historians of the era, leaving us a chillingly consistent account. Diodorus Siculus wrote of the event with stark clarity, describing how the sea flooded far inland and the city simply vanished beneath the waves. The Roman poet Ovid, in his Metamorphoses, captured the human terror, portraying the desperate citizens climbing to the rooftops only to be swept away by the relentless water. These were not just dry historical entries, they were reports of a genuine, witnessed catastrophe that shocked the entire Mediterranean. For the ancients, Helike became a powerful cautionary tale, a real-world example of divine retribution. But one detail, repeated across these sources, transforms the story from a tragedy into something far more haunting. For centuries after the disaster, fishermen sailing over the submerged ruins would report a startling sight. They claimed to see a magnificent bronze statue of Poseidon himself, standing upright on the seafloor, his arm outstretched as if still wielding his trident. This was not a vague ghost story, it was a specific, tangible image of the very god the city had worshipped now presiding over its watery tomb. The statue became a sacred warning, a physical anchor to a lost world, ensuring that Helike was lost but never truly forgotten. Its presence in the deep served as a constant, eerie reminder that the line between a thriving city and a maritime legend could be erased in one terrible night. For 2,000 years, the lost city of Helike was a ghost, its location a matter of speculation and local legend. The Roman general Lucius Mummius, after conquering the region in the 2nd century BC, was said to have sailed to the site of the disaster, hoping to see the famed bronze statue of Poseidon for himself. He saw nothing. The land had already changed, the coastline reshaped by the relentless deposition of silt from nearby rivers. Over the centuries, this slow, natural process created a vast, featureless alluvial plain, burying the ruins under meters of earth and mud. The city was not just lost to the sea, it was now imprisoned beneath a new, solid landscape. By the 19th century, the search had taken on a new, more scientific urgency. Archaeologists and classicists, armed with the ancient texts of Strabo and Pausanias, descended upon the region, convinced they could pinpoint the exact location. They surveyed the coastal villages, they studied the old river channels, and they dug test trenches. Yet every single effort ended in failure. The sheer volume of sediment laid down over 2 millennia had turned the search into an archaeological puzzle of the highest order. How do you find a city that was first drowned by a tsunami and then buried by a river delta? The general area was known, but the specific spot remained as elusive as ever, a frustrating testament to nature's power to not only destroy but to completely conceal. The lost city seemed determined to keep its secrets, hidden beneath a blanket of soil that had once been carried by the very waters that destroyed it. The 20th century finally brought tools capable of piercing that deep blanket of earth. While the old searchers had relied on texts and intuition, a new generation of archaeologists arrived with a different kind of power. They brought scientific rigor, bringing geology and physics to a problem that had once been the domain of historians and poets. The Greek Archaeological Service took a leading role, conducting the first systematic surveys of the coastal plain. They understood that finding Helike meant first understanding the land itself, reading the subtle shifts in the soil and rock that told a story of ancient cataclysm. This was a slow, methodical process, a far cry from the treasure hunts of the past. They were not just looking for a city, they were trying to reconstruct a landscape that had been utterly transformed. Every core sample pulled from the ground was like a page from a geological diary, recording layers of silt, sand, and the faint, hopeful traces of human activity. Yet, even with this new approach, the city remained stubbornly hidden. Its precise location a secret the Earth was not yet ready to surrender. The mystery demanded an even greater concentration of effort, a single, dedicated force to unite all these scientific disciplines. That force would soon arrive, bearing a name that left no doubt about its mission. It was called the Helike Project, founded in the late 1980s by the Greek archaeologist Dora Katsonopoulou and the American geologist Stephen Soter. This initiative represented a fundamental shift. For the first time, the search was a true partnership, a fusion of classical archaeology and cutting-edge geophysics. The team operated on a powerful new hypothesis. Perhaps Helike was not lost deep under the open sea, as the old stories suggested. The massive earthquake of 373 BC might have caused a phenomenon known as soil liquefaction, where solid ground, saturated with water, instantly turns into a liquid quicksand and during intense shaking. The city would not have sunk like a stone in the ocean, but rather been swallowed whole by its own land, which was then immediately inundated by the tsunami. This meant the ruins could be buried hundreds of meters inland, not offshore. It was a theory that turned the old search maps upside down. Armed with this idea, the Helike Project began a meticulous campaign. They used electrical resistivity tomography, a technique that sends currents into the ground to map subsurface structures by measuring how easily the soil conducts electricity. Ancient walls and compacted roads resist electrical current differently than soft clay or silt. They employed magnetometry, which can detect faint anomalies in the Earth's magnetic field caused by buried hearths, kilns, or even collapsed buildings. The team walked the fields in precise grids, their instruments scanning the unseen world beneath their feet, pixel by pixel. It was a process of elimination on a grand scale, slowly building a ghost image of what lay below. For years, the data came in, hinting at structures but offering no definitive proof. The team was piecing together the world's most difficult jigsaw puzzle without knowing what the final picture was supposed to be. They knew they were close, but the city continued to guard its silence, waiting for the one clue that would shatter 2 millennia of obscurity. The silence was finally broken not by a dramatic discovery, but by a subtle shift in thinking. Researchers began to question the most basic assumption that Helike lay at the bottom of the sea. They revisited the ancient accounts with a geologist's eye, reading between the lines of Strabo and Poseidon. These texts did not just describe a flood, they detailed a complex catastrophe, an earthquake so violent it caused the ground to sink. This was the key, a process called subsidence. The land Helike stood on had quite literally dropped, creating a new basin for the sea to rush in. At the same time, the region's powerful rivers, like the Selinus and the Currenites, were constantly washing soil down from the mountains. The cataclysm created a perfect trap, a sunken area that then acted as a massive catchment for this silt. Over centuries, this relentless deposition did not just cover the ruins, it completely transformed the coastline, pushing the sea back and creating the flat, fertile plain we see today. The city was not offshore, it was entombed within this new land, a ghost buried under meters of mud and sediment. This re-evaluation was a complete paradigm shift. It meant the search area, once focused on the waters of the Gulf, needed to move hundreds of meters inland. The lost city was hiding in plain sight beneath fields and villages, waiting for someone to look in the right place with the right tools. The mystery was no longer about diving deep, but about digging through the layers of a landscape that had rewritten its own history. This systematic hunt required a new kind of patience. The Helike project team began to map the subsurface not with shovels but with science. Their strategy was to listen to the whispers of the Earth itself. They deployed a technique called magnetometry, walking methodical grids across the flat plane while carrying instruments that acted like subterranean ears. These devices measured tiny, local variations in the Earth's magnetic field. The logic was brilliant in its simplicity. Fired materials like the clay from ancient pottery kilns or the stones of a hearth subjected to intense heat retain a faint, different magnetic signature than the surrounding soil and silt. A buried wall, a collapsed road, even a forgotten drainage channel, all would disrupt the natural magnetic field in a way these sensitive machines could detect. The team was not looking for the city itself yet. They were searching for its ghost, an anomalous imprint left on the very fabric of the ground. Alongside this, they began a campaign of drilling, extracting long, cylindrical core samples from deep below the surface. Each core was a time capsule, a vertical slice of history. The researchers would carefully lay these tubes of earth out on tables, examining every layer. They were searching for the telltale signs of human habitation, a thin, dark line of decomposed organic material that was once a garbage pit, or a sudden, compacted layer of crushed shell and pottery that might signal an ancient floor. It was painstaking, granular work. For years, the data accumulated, creating a fragmented, invisible map of something that might or might not be a city. They found hints, scattered anomalies that teased and suggested, but nothing that formed a coherent picture. The frustration must have been immense to know you are standing directly on top of a lost civilization, separated only by a few meters of dirt, yet be unable to see it. This was the ultimate test of their hypothesis, a high-stakes game of geological peek-a-boo played out over an entire coastal plain. The city was still hiding, but for the first time it was starting to leave traces. The breakthrough came in 2001, after years of listening to the whispers of the Earth. The team was excavating a trench in an unassuming field, guided by the subtle anomalies their magnetometers had detected. The diggers worked carefully through layers of sterile silt, the legacy of that ancient river delta. Then their tools scraped against something hard and unyielding, something that was not natural river stone. They had found a wall, not just any wall, but a structure of classical Greek construction, its stones still firmly set in place. It was the first solid proof, the first physical touch from a world lost for nearly 2,400 years. The excitement was electric, a palpable charge in the air as more of the trench was cleared. The discoveries came in a rapid, breathtaking cascade. They uncovered the foundations of buildings, their floor plans emerging from the mud. Then came the artifacts, objects frozen in the moment of the city's destruction. They found ancient pottery, its black and red figures depicting scenes from a life abruptly ended. There were coins, some stamped with the unmistakable image of Poseidon and his trident, a final, tragic confirmation of the city's identity. Every single object was encased within a distinct layer of marine sediment, a clear geological signature of the tsunami that had sealed the city's fate. This was not a city that had been abandoned and slowly decayed. It was a city captured in a single, catastrophic instant, buried under the sea and then sealed by the land. Decades of meticulous research, of scientific hypothesis and stubborn dedication were vindicated in that one trench. The lost city of Helike was no longer a legend or a ghost in the data. It was real, and it had been found. The ruins they unearthed were not a scattered collection of debris, but a ghostly snapshot of a city frozen in a single, terrible moment. Laid out before the archaeologists was the complete urban footprint of ancient Helike. They traced the lines of cobblestone streets, still worn smooth by the footsteps of its long-vanished citizens. These streets connected the foundations of buildings, from modest houses to more substantial structures, their floor plans perfectly preserved in the compacted clay. In one area, the team identified a pottery workshop, its kiln cold for millennia, surrounded by shattered vases and cups that never made it to market. Perhaps most telling was the discovery of a long, linear structure running parallel to what was once the coastline, a potential port facility that spoke directly to the city's maritime power. The very catastrophe that destroyed Helike also became its perfect preserver. The thick layer of silt and marine clay that slammed into the city acted like a time capsule, sealing everything in an anaerobic environment, safe from the erosive forces of air and water. This is why the foundations remained so perfectly intact, why the layout of the streets was so clear. The mud that was Helike's tomb became its guardian, locking the city's final day away for 2,400 years. To walk those excavated trenches was to stand in the silent streets of a place that was quite literally paused. You could almost hear the echoes of a bustling port city, a community alive with the sounds of trade, industry, and daily life, all suddenly silenced by the earth and the sea. Every artifact, every perfectly preserved wall was a testament to both the vibrant life that was lived here and the sheer, unstoppable power that ended it. Among the silent streets and workshops, one discovery stood out with profound significance. The excavation team uncovered the spiritual heart of the city, the very reason for its fame and power. They found the sanctuary of Poseidon. This was not just another building, it was the central nervous system of Helike's identity. The evidence was overwhelming and deeply moving. They unearthed the foundations of a grand altar, a place where countless offerings would have been made to the earth-shaking god. Scattered around it were the charred bones of sacrificial animals, a direct and chilling link to the rituals performed here. Then came the small, personal objects, bronze figurines and clay votives shaped like tridents and dolphins, left by citizens and pilgrims seeking the favor of the sea. These were not items of trade or daily life, they were objects of pure devotion. Finding this sanctuary did more than just confirm a historical fact, it completed a terrifying circle of irony. This city had built its entire existence around the worship of Poseidon. Its wealth, its influence, its very name were tied to his turbulent domain, and it was by his elements, the shaking earth and the raging sea, that he seemingly reclaimed it. The sanctuary's discovery transforms Helike from a tragic story into a profound and unsettling lesson. It was a city that lived by the sea and died by it, a powerful civilization whose greatest strength became its ultimate downfall. This spiritual center, now a ruin buried in mud, forces us to confront the raw, untamable power of the natural world that these ancient people both revered and feared. This silent city beneath the mud holds more than just buildings and artifacts. It holds the final, heartbreaking moments of its people. For all the grandeur of its port and its sanctuary, Helike was ultimately a community of families, artisans, and traders, and the archaeological record has preserved devastatingly personal glimpses of their fate. The most poignant discovery was not a gold coin or a bronze statue, but a single human skeleton found crushed beneath the collapsed walls of a building. Here was not a legend, but a person, someone who could not escape the violent shaking of the earthquake. Their remains, locked in the same layer of marine clay that entombed the city, tell a story of a life interrupted in its most private and terrifying moment. This one individual, whose name we will never know, transforms the historical catastrophe into a human tragedy. They were likely going about their nightly routine when the world literally fell apart around them. They might have been a parent, a child, a craftsperson, or a servant. Their silent testimony makes the ancient historians' accounts starkly real. When the texts say that every citizen perished, they are talking about thousands of lives, each as complex and full as this one, all extinguished in a single night. Think of the collective panic, the desperate scramble for safety that was ultimately futile. The tsunami did not discriminate between the wealthy merchant and the humble fisherman, the pious priest and the skeptical philosopher. The sea swept them all away, leaving behind only this haunting, anonymous representation of their shared doom. This personal connection forces us to look beyond the geological data and the architectural maps. We are no longer just studying a disaster, we are bearing witness to it. The story of Helike is not merely about a city that sank. It is about the hopes, dreams, and daily struggles of the people who called it home and whose lives ended in a cataclysm of earth and water. Their silent presence in the ground is a sobering reminder that history is written not just in stone and text, but in the fragile bones of those who lived it. And as we uncover their story, we are faced with an unsettling question that connects their world to our own. What does the rediscovery of this real-life Atlantis tell us about the power of myth and the thin, terrifying line that separates a thriving civilization from a cautionary tale buried for millennia? Helike's fate was not a random act of divine anger, but a predictable result of its location. The city was built directly on top of one of Greece's most active geological faults, a deep crack in the Earth's crust where two massive tectonic plates grind against each other. For centuries, pressure had been building along this fault line, the land slowly deforming like a spring being compressed. The earthquake of 373 BC was that spring finally snapping, releasing centuries of stored energy in a few violent seconds. This single event set off a devastating chain reaction, a 1-2 punch that doomed the city. First came the direct shock of the tremor, collapsing buildings and shattering foundations. But the second, more insidious effect happened underground. The ground beneath Helike was not solid rock. It was a loose mixture of sand, soil, and gravel, saturated with water from the nearby coast and rivers. When the intense shaking of the earthquake rippled through this waterlogged soil, the individual grains lost their contact with each other. In an instant, the solid ground that supported the city's weight turned into a liquid slurry, a process geologists call soil liquefaction. Imagine standing on a beach where the sand is firm, and then a wave washes over it, turning it into unstable, shifting quicksand. That is precisely what happened to the entire foundation of Helike. The city did not just topple, it began to sink, swallowed by its own liquefied ground. This subsidence created a basin, a sunken area of land now perfectly positioned for the final blow. The colossal movement of the seafloor during the earthquake displaced an enormous volume of water in the Corinthian Gulf, generating a towering tsunami. The wave rushed inland, not just flooding the city, but filling the newly created basin that the liquefaction had formed. The water had nowhere to go, turning the sunken ruins into a permanent lagoon that was later buried by silt. This scientific explanation, grounded in the modern understanding of plate tectonics, does not diminish the tragedy. It magnifies it. The people of Helike built their great city in a location of immense natural beauty and strategic advantage, completely unaware they were constructing their homes on a geological time bomb. Their story is a powerful, ancient lesson in the hidden forces that shape our world, forces we are only now beginning to fully comprehend. These parallels between Helike and Atlantis are too striking to ignore. Both were powerful coastal civilizations thriving on their mastery of the sea. Helike was the real-world leader of the Achaean League, while Plato described Atlantis as a vast naval empire. Both cities were also profoundly dedicated to the god of the sea. Helike was the principal sanctuary of Poseidon, and Atlantis, according to the story, was founded by the god himself with a grand temple at its heart. Their spiritual identity was woven from the same divine thread. The mechanism of their destruction is the most chilling similarity. Both met their end in a single, terrible day and night of violence. For Atlantis, it was earthquakes and floods that sank the island. For Helike, it was a massive earthquake followed by a devastating tsunami that swallowed the city. The timeline is identical, a rapid, unstoppable cataclysm. The final fate of both cities seals the connection. They did not just fall into ruin, they vanished completely beneath the water, leaving behind only stories and legends. The fishermen who saw the bronze statue of Poseidon under the waves are echoing the very same image of a sunken, advanced civilization that Plato would later immortalize. So was Helike the direct inspiration for the myth of Atlantis? The philosopher Plato was born shortly after Helike's destruction, and the event would have been a recent, terrifying memory in the Greek world. It was a real-life example of a proud, powerful city utterly erased by the sea, a perfect foundation for a moral fable about divine punishment. Helike gives us the blueprint, the historical event that proves such a disaster is not only possible, but it happened. It transforms Atlantis from a pure fantasy into a myth that is likely grounded in a terrifying geological truth. The real story is not about finding a fictional island, but about understanding how a real tragedy can echo through centuries, inspiring stories that warn us of the awesome power of nature. Yet for all their parallels, the differences between Helike and Atlantis are just as revealing. Helike stands firmly in the light of history, a city documented by its contemporaries and now confirmed by the trowels of archaeologists. We can walk its excavated streets and hold its coins. Atlantis, by contrast, exists solely in the realm of story, a philosophical device crafted by Plato to explore ideas of ideal states and moral decay. Its timeline is the first great divergence. Plato sets the destruction of Atlantis 9,000 years before his own time, a number that places it in a vague, mythical past. Helike was destroyed in 373 BC, a date recorded by multiple historians, an event that shook the known world within living memory. The scale of the two cities is also worlds apart. Atlantis was described as a colossal island empire larger than Asia and Libya combined, commanding a vast fleet and possessing technology that bordered on the magical. Helike, while powerful and influential, was a single, prosperous Greek city-state, its reach limited to the Corinthian Gulf. It was a real place of human scale, not a continent-spanning superpower. But perhaps the most crucial difference lies in the purpose of their narratives. The story of Helike is a historical record of a natural disaster, a tragedy that befell a real community. The story of Atlantis is a deliberate allegory. Plato was not a historian trying to preserve facts. He was a philosopher using a compelling tale to warn against the dangers of hubris and the corruption of a perfect society. He never intended for readers to search for a sunken continent. He wanted them to reflect on the health of their own city. So while Helike gives us the terrifying geological blueprint for a sunken city, Atlantis gives us its enduring moral. One is a lesson from the earth, the other a lesson for the soul. They are two sides of the same coin, one grounded in physical evidence, the other soaring in the realm of ideas, both reminding us of the fragile relationship between human civilization and the immense forces that surround it. Plato was a boy when Helike vanished. The cataclysm that erased a powerful city would have been the talk of the Greek world, a terrifying story told and retold in the very Athens where the young philosopher grew up. The timeline fits almost perfectly. Helike sank in 373 BC. Plato was born around 428 BC, making him a young man in his late 40s or early 50s when the disaster struck. This was no distant legend from 9,000 years ago. It was a current event, a shocking news story that would have dominated conversations in the marketplace and the academy. Imagine the impact of such a tale on a mind like Plato's, a thinker already preoccupied with the nature of ideal states and the reasons for their decline. The raw, factual account of a real city devoted to Poseidon being punished by that very god's elements would have been a powerful, real-world example of the hubris and divine retribution he would later explore in his own work. But how did a local Greek tragedy become the foundation for a story about a vast, ancient empire? The answer lies in the trade winds and the well-traveled routes of the ancient Mediterranean. The city of Helike was a major commercial hub, its ships carrying goods and ideas across the sea. Its destruction would have been major news not just in Greece but in every port with which it traded. Sailors and merchants from Egypt, a civilization with a deep and recorded history stretching back millennia, would have heard the story and carried it back to the scribes and priests of the Nile Delta. In the Egyptian telling, filtered through their own sense of immense antiquity, the story of a sunken city could easily have been transformed, its timeline stretched back into the deep past to fit their own historical framework. When Plato himself traveled to Egypt later in life, he would have encountered this evolved version of the tale. He would have sat with priests who spoke of a great power from the west that sank beneath the waves in a time of great earthquakes. He then took this powerful narrative kernel and crafted it into his own philosophical allegory, dressing it with the details of an advanced utopian society to serve his moral lesson. The real city of Helike provided the terrifying, factual core, the proof that such a disaster was possible. The Egyptian tradition provided the mythic scale and ancient pedigree. And Plato's genius provided the enduring moral. The lost city was not a fiction pulled from thin air, but a real event reshaped by time and travel, waiting for a philosopher to give it an immortal form. The story of Helike does not exist in a vacuum, for the human mind is a great collector of catastrophes. Another powerful candidate for the seed of the Atlantis myth lies 140 miles to the southeast in the spectacular caldera of Santorini. Around the year 1600 BC, the volcanic island then known as Thera exploded in one of the most violent eruptions in human history. The Minoan civilization on Crete, a sophisticated, seafaring empire with advanced plumbing and vibrant art, was likely crippled by the ensuing tsunamis and ash fall. Here was a truly advanced society brought low by a cataclysm from the sea, its grand palaces buried under volcanic pumice. The parallels are undeniable. Yet for all its grandeur, the Minoan theory requires a much greater leap across time and space to reach Plato. Thera erupted over 1,000 years before his birth, and the Minoans were a distinct pre-Greek culture. Their story had to survive a millennium of oral tradition and the collapse of their entire world before being filtered through Egyptian priests and finally reaching a Greek philosopher. Helike, by contrast, offers a more direct and immediate connection. It was a Greek city destroyed in a Greek war within Plato's own lifetime. Its destruction by earthquake and tsunami is a perfect, literal match for the cataclysm described in his dialogues. While the Minoan collapse is a grand, prehistoric drama, the fall of Helike was a current event, a tragedy witnessed and meticulously recorded by the very historians whose works formed the bedrock of Plato's own education. Its geographical and cultural proximity to Athens makes it a hauntingly personal template, a story of neighbors vanishing into the earth, proving that such a fate was not just a legend from a distant past, but a terrifying possibility right on their doorstep. The shockwave from Helike's collapse rippled far beyond its submerged walls, leaving a deep scar on the Greek psyche. For a society that saw the gods in every lightning strike and shifting tide, the utter annihilation of a city dedicated to Poseidon was not a random tragedy, it was a message. It was interpreted as a clear and terrifying act of divine punishment. Whispers and accusations spread, suggesting the Helicans had committed some grave sacrilege against their own patron god. Perhaps they had defiled his sanctuary or grown arrogant in their prosperity, forgetting the piety required to balance such power. The complete and spectacular nature of their demise seemed to confirm the most ancient of fears, that the gods were not just powerful, but actively intervened in human affairs with brutal, final consequences. This event became a real-world anchor for a theme that would dominate Greek thought for centuries: the concept of hubris, the dangerous arrogance that invites divine retribution. You can hear the echoes of Helike in the great tragedies performed in Athenian theaters just a generation later. Playwrights like Euripides crafted stories of proud heroes and powerful families brought low by forces they defied, their downfalls mirroring the sudden, inescapable fate of an entire city. The story of Helike was the ultimate proof that the universe was morally structured and that transgressions would be met with catastrophic physical force. This collective fear of natural disasters as divine messages shaped not just art but daily life and political rhetoric, forcing a constant, anxious negotiation between human ambition and the perceived will of the gods. The city's legacy was cemented not in bronze or stone, but in the indelible mark it left on the historical record, a permanent cautionary tale written in water and mud. That sunken city refused to be silenced by the waves. The story of Helike carried on the currents of trade and tragedy, seeped into the creative life of the ancient world, finding a powerful voice in the Roman poet Ovid. In his epic work, Metamorphoses, he immortalized the city's final moments not as a dry historical footnote, but as a visceral human experience. He described the terror of the citizens, their desperate scramble to high ground as the earth split and the sea pursued them. Through his poetry, the physical catastrophe was transformed into a timeless allegory of nature's wrath, ensuring the memory of Helike would resonate far beyond the libraries of historians and into the hearts of a vast empire. This artistic survival did not end with the classical age. As the Renaissance reawakened Europe's interest in antiquity, cartographers began to piece together the ancient world from fragments of text. Their maps, beautiful and speculative, sometimes featured a tantalizing label along the coast of the Peloponnese, the words Hellas or Vetus Hellas inscribed over the water. These were not accurate locations, but acts of scholarly faith, an insistence that a place described so vividly by the great authors must have a spot on the globe. The city lived on as a cartographic ghost, a testament to the enduring power of a good story. This persistence in art and maps cemented Helike's role in a much broader tradition, the cultural memory of the lost city. It became a foundational stone in the architecture of imagination, a real event that proved the concept of a civilization vanishing without a trace was not just possible but had precedent. Every later story of a sunken utopia or a land swallowed by the sea, from lioness to wise, owes a debt to the chilling reality of Helike. It is the crucial link that tethers our most fantastical myths to the solid ground of geological fact, proving that reality, when it is terrifying enough, can fuel the imagination for 1,000 years. The excavation at Helike is far from over. Even now, the trowels and brushes of archaeologists are revealing new layers of this ancient story, proving the city's history runs deeper than anyone suspected. Recent digs have uncovered more structures from the classical city, expanding our map of its final moments, but the real surprise came when the team dug deeper beneath the layer of marine clay from the Great Tsunami. There, they found something that rewrites the entire history of the region, the remains of an even older Bronze Age settlement, dating back over 3,000 years before the classical city fell. This discovery is monumental. It reveals that this was not just a lucky spot for one city, but a strategic and sacred location for millennia, a continuous hub of human activity stretching back to the age of myths and heroes. Think of the generations that lived on this very ground, each building upon the ruins of the last, completely unaware of the geological fault line sleeping beneath their feet. The evidence is stunning, with pottery shards, stone tools, and the foundations of buildings from a culture that thrived 1,000 years before the Trojan War. This means the classical Helicans were not the first to build a great community here. They were merely the last in a long, unbroken chain. Their sanctuary to Poseidon might have been built on a site that was considered holy for generations, a place where the power of the earth and sea had been revered since time immemorial. Each new find peels back another layer of time, transforming the site from a single tragedy into a sprawling epic of human resilience and vulnerability. With every season, the story grows richer, connecting the dots between a legendary cataclysm and the real, vibrant lives that pulsed here for thousands of years. What other secrets are waiting to be unearthed from this ground that has witnessed the full sweep of ancient history? This muddy tomb that sealed the city's fate also became its greatest protector. The same thick layer of silt and marine clay that slammed into Helike, snuffing out all life, created a remarkable phenomenon known as an anaerobic environment. As the sediment settled, it effectively smothered the ruins, pushing out all the oxygen. Without oxygen, the bacteria and microorganisms that normally cause wood to rot, leather to decay, and food to disintegrate simply cannot survive. It is a natural preservation process on a grand scale, turning a catastrophic event into a historical deep freeze. Think of it like sealing a precious letter in a vacuum-packed bag, halting time itself. This is what makes the Helike site not just an archaeological dig, but an ecological time capsule of unparalleled potential. While most classical sites offer us stone, pottery, and metal, Helike promises something far more intimate, the fragile, everyday remains of a lost world. The potential here is breathtaking. Imagine uncovering a wooden loom, its frame and delicate spindles still intact, telling us not just that they wove cloth, but how they did it. We could find the actual seeds from their last meals still stored in a clay pot, allowing scientists to identify the exact strains of barley, olives, or grapes they cultivated. A child's leather sandal, preserved with the imprint of a small foot, would speak volumes more than any statue about the people who lived here. Even a piece of rope, a wicker basket, or the pollen grains trapped in the mud could reveal the local flora and the agricultural practices of the time. Each of these fragile artifacts would be a direct window into a single day in 373 BC, a snapshot of daily life frozen at the very moment it was interrupted. This isn't just about finding objects, it's about reconstructing the scent, the texture, and the rhythm of a city that has been silent for millennia. What could these whispers from the mud tell us about the final hours of a civilization dedicated to the god of the sea? But the very mud that preserved Helike now presents its greatest modern threat. Exposed to the air after 2,400 years, the fragile organic remains begin to decay almost immediately. The wood, the seeds, the textiles that survived millennia in an oxygen-free tomb start to crumble upon contact with our modern atmosphere. This creates an urgent race against time for archaeologists, who must either rapidly conserve each artifact on site or rebury it to protect it from the elements. Beyond the science, the site faces pressure from the modern world itself. The fertile plain that hides the city is prime land for agriculture and new construction, with foundations and irrigation systems potentially disturbing untouched ruins. The challenge is a delicate balancing act, protecting a priceless historical treasure while respecting the needs and livelihoods of the local community who live above it. The solution taking shape is as ambitious as the original excavation. There is a powerful vision to transform the entire area into a permanent archaeological park, a place where visitors can walk above the ruins on raised platforms, looking down into the excavated streets and buildings of the sunken city. This would protect the site from unnecessary disturbance while making it accessible to the world. Central to this plan is the creation of an on-site museum, a building designed to house the most delicate finds in climate-controlled environments. Imagine standing before a perfectly preserved wooden loom from the classical era, or seeing the actual carbonized olives from a Helican's final meal. This museum would tell the complete story, not just with artifacts, but with interactive displays explaining the geology of the fault line and the terrifying physics of soil liquefaction. It would bridge the gap between a historical dig and a profound human experience. For the local villagers, this represents a significant opportunity. Helike is becoming a major destination for a new kind of traveler, the history tourist. These are visitors who seek more than a beach holiday. They want to connect with the deep past, to stand on the ground where history actually happened. This growing interest brings a sustainable economic boost, creating jobs in hospitality, guiding, and local crafts, giving the community a direct stake in preserving their own heritage. The story of this real-life Atlantis is no longer confined to textbooks. It is stepping into the light as a living monument. It serves as a permanent reminder of nature's power and the fragility of human endeavor, a lesson from the past that is now drawing people from across the globe to witness where a city once sank and where a legend was born. The pull of this story lies in a deep and primal part of our imagination. We are drawn to the ruins of a lost world not out of morbid curiosity, but because they hold up a mirror to our own civilization. Helike's fate forces us to confront a terrifying truth, that the ground beneath our feet is not as solid as it seems, and the sea that gives us life can also take it all away. This is not a fear unique to the ancient Greeks. It is a universal human anxiety, a whisper in the back of our minds that wonders what would remain of our cities, our technologies, and our stories if the earth were to simply swallow them whole. The mystery of Helike captivates because it is the ultimate what-if scenario, played out with real streets and real people. It proves that the line between a bustling modern city and a forgotten legend is terrifyingly thin, a line that can be crossed in a single night. This real-life Atlantis grounds our most fantastical myths in the gritty truth of archaeology. It tells us that our ancestors were not so different from us. They built, they prospered, and they too faced forces beyond their control or comprehension. When we look at the foundations of Helike, we are not just looking at an ancient ruin. We are looking at a cautionary tale written in clay and stone, a permanent reminder of the fragile contract between humanity and the planet we call home. That is a story that will never lose its power. So the lost city of Helike offers us something truly rare, a tangible link between a philosophical myth and a historical event. This incredible journey from a story told by Plato to a city unearthed from the mud rewrites our understanding of how legends are born. We have watched as a powerful metropolis dedicated to the god of the sea was swallowed in a single night by that very sea. We have followed the stubborn quest of archaeologists who refused to let the story die, and we have stood with them as they finally touched the stones of a civilization lost for millennia. Helike does not prove that Atlantis was real, but it gives the legend a plausible, beating heart. It shows us the terrifying blueprint, the kind of real-world catastrophe that could inspire a tale of a utopia punished by the gods. The city beneath the silt is the ultimate bridge connecting the world of fact with the power of fable. This story is far from over. New discoveries are still emerging from the ground with every digging season, each one adding another piece to this ancient puzzle. The search for understanding is a journey we can all take part in. We encourage you to follow the ongoing work of the Helike Project, to see the new artifacts as they are revealed, and to become a part of this living history. What other mysteries do you think are still buried, waiting for their story to be told? Share your thoughts on history's greatest enigmas in the comments below, and let's continue this exploration together.